Classes with a native speaking teacher, personalized feedback, homework. Do you really need all of that to become fluent? Can we achieve the same thing if we just study by ourselves? I think it would be cool if we had the same person trying both approaches and two separate realities within the same universe to test it. Anyway guys, even without the test, there are some fundamental things that I would like to share with you today so that you understand what works for you and what doesn't. As someone who is learning 3 languages, I will share how my approach changes depending on what language I'm learning. Motivation. If you're genuinely interested in a language, you're probably already engaged with it. You might already be watching educational videos on YouTube, you have your Anki cards, you watch TV shows, movies, you read in this language because you just love learning this language. You love the language, you love learning it, you love everything about it. You understand why you're learning this language. And in this case, this idea that you need a teacher might not even cross your mind because you love the system you have in place and you don't think you need a teacher. But what if you're someone who doesn't really have a specific goal or strong motivation to learn a language? You kind of know you need to study this foreign language, but you don't really know why. You feel like you're struggling with self-discipline, you feel like you've been learning this language for the last 10 years, well, here you are, you still can't speak this language. I knew so many people who tried studying online, who tried programs and courses, and yes, they found a lot of value in those products, but at the same time, they're still not practicing this language and their level is still exactly the same. They have not progressed at all, or maybe just a little bit. In this case, if you're that second person, I think for you, a teacher would not just be an educator, but a person who could motivate you. And I think you would benefit a lot from having a teacher. At the same time, I think as a student, you will have to be honest and tell your teacher, look, I love this language, I need to learn this language, but I struggle with motivation and self-discipline. I really want you to discipline me or motivate me, check my homework, give me homework, and make sure I stay on top of everything. Because by myself, I struggle. It's really hard for me to do that. If you can find that person who can become your educator and motivator, you will benefit a lot from that because this teacher will be able to find the strategy and the plan that works for you, and you will actually start seeing your progress. Feedback. The main role of a teacher is to give you valuable feedback. But what comes to your mind when you hear the word feedback? What is feedback? Some people will say that it is all the mistakes that your teacher corrects, or maybe it's like those words of encouragement, like you can do it, you did well, or maybe it's a personalized plan, something to listen to today, something to read next Friday. For other people, it will be an assignment or a pep talk to work on your confidence. Feedback can be both positive and negative, and it can also be perceived positively and negatively. This is why communication is important, and you have to be communicating your thoughts and ideas to your teacher clearly. You can't expect them to guess everything for you and to create a perfect plan for you just because they can read your mind, they can read your thoughts. It doesn't work like that. If you know that you want a specific plan or you want specific feedback, you have to tell them, look, I would really appreciate if you did that. Can you do that for me? Let's say for you, if a teacher interrupts your train of thought and corrects every single one of your mistakes, you don't like it. For you, it's a negative experience because for me, that's actually a positive experience. I love when my teacher interrupts me every single second, every time I make a mistake, because I want to know every single mistake I make. However, I know so many people who hate that and who tell me, Veronica, actually, you know what? I love when my teacher just waits. You know, I love when I can express everything I want to say, and then my teacher is like, okay, you made a mistake here you could have said that, but you said this. So this is something that I prefer. For many people, this structure will help them maintain the flow of conversation, the flow of communication, and I completely understand that. And that's why I think it is so important to talk to your teacher. And that's why many teachers at the very beginning of every class, they ask you, okay, do you want me to correct your mistakes? How often do you want me to correct you? You have to be honest with them, and you have to think about it too. Do I like being corrected? How often do I like being corrected? And you have to have answers for all of these questions before your class so that you can save time and start talking. I also know so many people who perceive their teacher as a mentor, and for me, it is a very big part. It means a lot to me what I feel after class. Right now, I'm learning the American Sign Language, and that's exactly what I feel about my American Sign Language teacher, because every single time I have a conversation with him, after class, I feel so empowered and inspired, and I actually want to practice. I actually want to learn new signs just because of him. So guys, first ask yourself, how do you feel in the presence of your teacher? Do you feel like this person helps you improve and values your efforts? Or maybe you want to give up just because it just feels too overwhelming. Maybe your teacher shared too much information with you, or they ask you too many things and you just feel overwhelmed. If that happens, please communicate with them. More often than not, they're willing to change the way they structure the lessons, and unfortunately some people are not willing to do that. If you see that nothing is changing, of course it's totally okay to change your teacher. Always value this human-to-human communication, teacher to student communication versus the price or the status of a teacher. When to turn to a teacher? Personally, I think that in the early stages, it would be better if you could experience the language just by yourself. Let's say you want to learn Korean. Instead of immediately turning to a teacher, think about why you want to learn Korean. What's your goal? What's your motivation? And just start. Start with the basics. There's so much information online right now. Usually, at least this is something that I struggled with at the very beginning, is pronunciation. So I would take maybe a class or two at the very beginning to ask the teacher for some pronunciation advice to make sure I'm pronouncing all the sounds correctly, and then I move on by myself because I understand that it is my responsibility. It is not my teacher's responsibility to teach me this language and to make me learn this language, because at the end of the day, it is all on me. How fast I progress in this language is my responsibility. I don't think there is a need for a teacher if you only have a few questions, because right now, again, we have so many resources. You can ask ChatGPT, and that's something that I do very often. I have a question about the difference between two words, let's say. You can ask ChatGPT, or maybe you can go online. There's so many communities online where you can ask real people if you think that the answer ChatGPT gave you is not enough. I have actually made a video on how to learn a language with ChatGPT, so you can click right here and check it out. As you progress in the language, you start forming your own picture of this language. You get some listening and speaking practice. Then you might want to track your progress. I think here you will be able to get more from your class because you have already passed a lot of beginner mistakes. Like, I don't think there is a need for a teacher before you learn your first 1,000 words in this language, because you don't really want to spend your time and your teacher's time learning how to say cow, let's say, in the language you want to learn. You can do it by yourself. It is so incredibly easy. If you remember in one of my previous videos, I said that I kind of struggle with the pronunciation of this word in Spanish. And yes, I asked my teacher about the pronunciation. So even at the very beginning, if you struggle with pronunciation, it is totally okay to book a class. I just don't think this time should be spent learning all of this new vocabulary, because you can learn this vocabulary by yourself. But of course, asking a lot of questions about pronunciation, especially if you're taking a class with a native speaker, will help you a lot. A teacher can become a person who observes you and who helps you find the best strategy for you right now. Previously, we talked about motivation. If you feel like you need encouragement at the very beginning, like for me, for example, every time I start learning a new language, at the very beginning, I don't know why it's just so hard for me. Like I would say the first 2 months are probably the hardest, because I don't know anything about this language yet and I feel completely lost. So again, if you need encouragement, if you feel like you need a little bit of help, taking a class or two at the very beginning is completely okay too. And honestly, at any stage of your journey, Even if you're advanced in this language and you feel like you need encouragement, you need someone to tell you how great your language skills are, of course you can take a class with a teacher. Advantages of practicing alone. You can do all aspects of language learning on your own. And now you're probably gonna ask me, what about speaking? How do I practice speaking without a teacher? First of all, it is possible. You don't technically need an actual teacher to practice speaking. There are so many great resources online or offline where you can practice speaking. You can download and use different apps to find speaking partners, or you can attend a speaking club either online or in person. I remember when I lived in Moscow, back when I was in college, I attended so many different English speaking clubs. And that's how I improved my speaking skills. I didn't have a teacher. I did everything on my own because I understood that I was responsible for my language skills. I was responsible for my progress. And so I had to create everything for myself and not rely on one person who can give all of this to me. Right now, AI is developing like crazy. So you can use different apps like Elsa to do role plays and practice conversation. That's why so many people right now feel like they don't really need a teacher, because maybe more often than not, they just need a speaking partner, a person who they can speak with. But also, please keep in mind the fact that oftentimes when we find a speaking buddy, we have to practice kind of our language with them too, right? Because it's like a mutual exchange. Let's say I teach you Russian and you teach me Turkish, right? So I have to spend an hour of my time too teaching you Russian. And if my goal is to learn Turkish like really fast and I don't have time to teach anyone Russian, this might not be a good option for me, because yes, I understand that now I will probably have to pay money, have classes with a teacher, but this way I will save my time. And right now, time is everything. And a lot of people value their time so much and I think it's the right thing to do. So that's why taking classes with a teacher in this case is recommended. Of course, AI has a lot of great benefits, but what it fails to do is this like human-to-human connection, right? The teacher who helps me learn the American Sign Language actually knows a few words in Russian, and it's not the connection I could ever build with AI. Of course, I know that AI knows all the different languages, but it is not the same. When you start talking to someone and they ask you, oh, where are you from? And you tell them, oh, I'm from this city. And this person is like, oh my God, I went to college there. Or, oh my God, my wife is from there. It's a completely different experience. AI cannot understand or feel confusion, frustration, fears, insecurities, or experience joy of success and continuous improvement. For this reason, you do need a person to talk to. Maybe not a teacher, maybe just a speaking buddy. Can you learn 7 languages without a teacher? I learned 3 foreign languages in 3 completely different environments. I started learning English when I was a little kid. I was probably like 6 years old in school. It was nothing too serious. I honestly hated English and I didn't practice much. But then once I started growing up, I decided that I was responsible for my success and I started practicing by myself. Of course, throughout my journey, I had some amazing teachers, but at the same time, I did so much work by myself. When I went to college, I started learning Chinese. So I would say I learned Chinese in this academic environment. When I graduated from college, my Chinese was upper intermediate, like my Chinese was pretty good. It's been 2 years since I graduated from college and I haven't practiced the language much, to be honest. And I don't want to because it is not my priority right now. I don't really know why I need this language right now. So for now, I am, relaxing a little bit in terms of Chinese. But I would say that my experience was completely different. Like I spent 5 years in college studying Chinese and I didn't know how to say duvet or a blanket or a pillow, something that we use every single day, just because my focus was on Chinese economics and politics, and it was not everyday Chinese. In a way, I understood that, but at the same time, I really lacked vocabulary when I had to talk to a real Chinese person. I didn't know a lot of cultural things like idioms that Chinese people often use, or maybe slang, and I was never taught that. But again, as I just said before, it is so important to just tell yourself that You're an adult, so you are the one responsible. If it was actually important for me, I would spend more time, learning how to say a duvet cover in Chinese, a pillow in Chinese, but I didn't, so I guess it was not important for me. Right now, I'm studying Spanish and I live among native speakers, and for me, it is my first experience ever. I have never been to China before. The first time I visited an English-speaking country, I was 20, and by that age, my English was pretty good. So when I moved to Mexico, I knew zero Spanish, and now I'm learning so much. I'm learning so many cool things about the culture. I'm learning so many slang words just because I live here. And I think this is something that I love about actually living in the country where your target language is spoken, because this way you can learn so many cultural things that otherwise you would never learn. The first time I heard someone say que padre, que chido, no mames way, I was like, oh yeah. These are the words I want to learn because they represent the culture. And I knew if I was learning Spanish in a classroom environment, first of all, I would probably learn Spanish from Spain. There's nothing wrong about that, but my focus was Spanish in Mexico and in Latin America. And this is connected with something that I talk about so much too. It's so important to understand why you're learning this language. Like if, let's say, you're learning Spanish from Spain, probably you want to move to Spain, which is amazing, but then probably you don't need to know what que padre, que chido, no mames way, like all of those informal Mexican expressions. You probably don't need to learn them, especially at the very beginning. Because at the beginning, we feel so overwhelmed already. So I hope you found all the answers you were looking for when you clicked on this video. Let me know down in the comments what experience you have learning foreign languages, and if you ever had a teacher, if you think you needed a teacher, if a teacher played a significant role in your language learning.